From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gronowski. So glad to be with you again for our second hour of today's broadcast. We're coming to you on FM and AM on our Florida flagship stations, iHeartRadio 93.1 FM, WFLA, 540 AM, perhaps WHBO News Talk Florida, Tampa Bay. You're coming to us now. We're glad to have you there. But remember, you can also listen to our podcast where you'll have these radio episodes as well as our online-only podcast, Things Hidden, which you can find on all podcast platforms. Just search for David Gronowski, my name, under any podcast platform of your preference. And if it's not there, let us know, and we'll be glad to add it to your podcast platform that you prefer. And that's what you can do to catch our content whenever you're not in the car on the radio. You don't want to miss it because we have a lot of exclusive content on ourneighborschoice.com. Very good stuff to check out. And I want to read this story that I wrote 40 years ago on the Foundation for Economic Education's website, fee.org. It's called Power Perfected in Weakness, Saturnalia versus Christmas. And I think it's appropriate given our season. And, people like to try to make everything, tidy and talk about Christmas up until the day of December 25th and then don't talk about it again. But that's not how we do things on this program. We're going to talk about it because it's relevant. My article says, around the world this season, humans of every culture and language are singing, "Joy to the world, the Lord has come. Let earth receive her King. He rules the world with truth and grace and makes the nations prove the glories of his righteousness and wonders of his love." Jesus' birth is a cause for celebration and joy. However, those who wish to be keepers of his flame are often prone to err in fashioning an objectified version of Jesus, a mental projection of the kind of power they themselves admire or aspire to, namely a role model who demands submission and praise. Not so, Jesus told Paul of Tarsus. My grace is sufficient for you, for power is perfected in weakness. What kind of strange power is perfected in weakness? The answer to this mystery continues to erode the very foundations of strong structures, political social orders across the globe, wherever the story is told and imitated, however palely by its imitators. Before the Christmas season, there was the ancient Roman festival of Saturnalia. The festival celebrated the god of Saturn and the last drips of light the community could enjoy before the coming winter solstice, the shortest day of the year. Light was associated with wisdom and understanding, and so candles were exchanged along with other gifts, and master-slave roles were reversed, while masks anonymized everyone into a flurry of sameness. Saturn was the god of agriculture, wealth, and abundance. As such, his figure embodied the values of the reigning sacrificial world order. Domination systems are unquestioned and forever cyclically refreshed with new rulers and human sacrifices. Indeed, the ruler and sacrifice, ostensibly polar opposites on the hierarchy of Roman life, shared an odd mirror relationship, and that the supreme rulers could easily become a human sacrifice lest the passions of the mob overrun the ruler's ability to harness it. Each year, a Roman soldier was chosen by a lottery to be the king of the month's festivities. An exceptional-looking young man was garbed in royal attire in imitation of Saturn. He was paraded around the festivities and given privileges to command others and do ridiculous acts, as well as indulge in every kind of vice imaginable. To complete the festival, in the imitation of Saturn's persona itself, the king would cut his own throat on the altar of Saturn. Myth recounts Saturn himself being sacrificed for the salvation of the world. This was the light or wisdom of the world as man knew it. In fact, evidence of mock scapegoat king rituals is found all over the ancient world. The world and the logic it functions by is cyclical, hierarchical, both of which are governed by sacrifice. Slaves know their place at the lowest end of fellowship, a fact only reinforced by the sacred time's temporary allowance of taboo role reversals in which masters served slaves in the Saturnalia festival. Saturnalia's controlled recreation of the loss of difference and order reflected the primordial chaos the imperial Roman cult saved its people from by its ordering light of gods demanding sacrifices, be it in rituals, festivals, or war campaigns to preserve the collective body and everyone's place in it. In the early 4th century, a young soldier named Dacius of Durostorum threatened that social order. He was selected to be the Saturnalia king for the month, but as a Christian, refused to partake in the imitation of Saturn, the accompanying pleasures, and its eventual required sacrifice of his life. For Dacius, no animal or human's life was required by God. According to Jesus, the role model Dacius imitated instead of Saturn, God desires mercy, not sacrifice. Dacius was summarily beheaded, lest he became a total buzzkill and turned the sacrificial order of pax decorum, or peace, of the gods rather than their anger. But the anger of the gods was really just a narrative cover-up for the chaos and calamity that befell pagan communities that did not preserve difference and cycles of domination systems. Drunkenness, loss of boundaries over whose food belonged to whom, gambling, orgies, masked identities, all the festivities, activities leading up to the mock king sacrifice to Saturn were meant to illuminate the community with the light of understanding that monopolies of state cult violence were necessary, lest people lose their sense of self in a sea of sameness and madness. Saturnalia's festival of light and Dacius's nonviolent defiance of its violent logic gives us context for what is so significant about the birth narrative of Jesus. The Gospel of Luke starts the story with a nod to the light or logic of empire. Now, in those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that a census be taken of all the inhabited earth. Caesar Augustus inherited the throne from Julius Caesar, himself a victim of the political whims of the mob, in a flash of disorder that led to his sacrifice. Augustus was named Son of God by virtue of his ancestry. History records Augustus's reign as one marked by peace and order. He accomplished this through his effective war campaigns that united the people around common monsters to sacrifice their lives to defeat for the empire. This people's senator very much maintained the careful hierarchy of authoritarian control as administered through the safe pharmakos, or drug, of pagan sacrifice. Luke's decree of Caesar Augustus can be read the word of the Son of God. The Gospel of John starts his origin telling of Jesus with an interesting parallel. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and apart from him, nothing came into being that has come into being. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. The gospel writers intentionally contrast Jesus, Son of God, Light, and Word, with the pagan parallel titles and words of their contemporary imperial world order. The light of Saturn is sacrifice. The light of Jesus is mercy, not sacrifice. Luke's story goes on to highlight that Caesar Augustus's decree is a census, a means of assessing the value of the empire's global subjects so as to apportion a tax on them. Augustus's Son of God status rests on his ability to tax human beings across the globe. The power to tax, as Daniel Webster said, is the power to destroy. Indeed, his image is carried with every one of his subjects, perhaps not engraved on their hearts, but certainly on the coins he minted with his likeness and Son of God title, and with whom he forced their submission and obedience. That's what Caesar Augustus did. Jesus, on the other hand, as Paul says, insists human beings are the image of God. All human beings, regardless of slave or master status, political privilege, or control over political violence. Imperial coins are cold, lifeless bearers of the cyclical old imperial order, whose god-kings are always grasping to extend their turn at the helm of harvest before the darkness of winter in its accompanying sacrifice falls. Caesar Augustus was born near the Roman Forum, the very heart of Roman grandeur and cultural esteem. Jesus, this new Son of God, is born in a barn food trough, an alleged bastard child to a woman of ill repute. For Augustus's Saturnalia festivals, slaves were only mockingly permitted to be served by their masters for a small time. Jesus continues his stable revolution against this imperial light and logic by washing the feet of his followers as a kind of performance art, prefiguring a future light and logic of his new world order, one where the first are last and the last first. Caesar Augustus was spared the sacrificial end of his predecessor by channeling the people's tensions towards sacrificial safety valves in the form of successful military campaigns against foreign groups like Germania and Hispania. Jesus, by contrast, later asks in Luke, "Do you think that I have come to bring peace to the earth? No, I tell you, but division. From now on, 5 in one household will be divided, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. By refusing to sacrifice others and model leadership that lords power over others, Jesus destroys the light and logic of every empire in history. By performing the mock king sacrificial ritual, Jesus' nonviolent forbearance and forgiveness of his own persecuting mob at the cross exposes the darkness that is the light and logic of empire. It is not the pie in the sky gods that demand sacrifice, but human crowds possessed by rage and fear and self-righteousness. Just like the Romans covered their conscience by blaming Saturn for the need to sacrifice innocent life, so too Jesus' own community said it was God's will that Jesus perish so that the whole nation would not perish. Jesus' word of light outshines the darkness of imperial sacrificial order, and it continues to infect humanity to this day. Yet man, stubborn and prideful in his ignorance, is slow to renounce it completely. And so we are ever conscious of the victims most likely to be sacrificed by our ancestors. Ethnic minorities, the disabled, the infirm, the weak, the disfigured, even the elite. Yet our sacrificial impulse always finds a creative way to attempt its old logic of expelling or murdering sacrifices for the preservation of collectivism and empire. We'll take a quick break and return on A Neighbor's Choice in just a moment. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck on a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender. Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR.
Not ready to go to your favorite seafood restaurant? Get the highest quality fish for less, delivered straight to your door by Fast Fresh Seafood. Order our fresh hot snapper, grouper, mahi, and more. They're boneless, skinless, flash frozen the same day, and individually vacuum wrapped. Pick the size filet you want, the amount you want, and checkout's easy at fastfreshseafood.com. The best thing, every fish is on sale. Fastfreshseafood.com. Caught fresh for you, delivered straight to you. Stay home and stay safe.
Come to the forest. It's a place not so far away where you don't have to mow the lawn or babysit. Ask your parents to take you to where the other you lives. But first, stop by discovertheforest.org, brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Here's one thing you can scratch off your to-do list without going anywhere, without any out-of-pocket cost to you, and even get up to $150 cash back. Get that crack in your windshield fixed by calling Auto Glass America. They'll come to you, and with comprehensive insurance coverage, there's no cost to you. Call Auto Glass America now and fix that pane in the glass with premium glass and a lifetime warranty. Call 813-96-GLASS, 813-96-GLASS. Auto Glass America.
This portion of the upcoming amazing broadcast is brought to you by the law firm of Catania & Catania, award-winning personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys, serving Tampa Bay families for over 28 years.
A Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm David Gronowski, and I'm reading this story for Christmas time on Power Perfected in Weakness, an article I wrote that explores Christmas versus Saturnalia. And you got to understand this if you want to know the context of what we're dealing with in the world today. And, I was reading the article and I was like, man, this is it's got some dry parts here. I don't know if I'm still keeping the radio audience. And then I see comments online. Listener Hunter's Dream says, I never understood any of this until now, and I went to church a lot as a kid. I sung in the choir. Incredible. So that gives me some hope that the article is resonating as I finish it now about the meaning of Christmas in history and what it means for you. So just to recap, Jesus' word of light that outshines the darkness of imperial sacrificial order continues to infect humanity to this day. Yet man, stubborn and prideful in his ignorance, is slow to renounce it completely. And so we are ever conscious of the victims, most likely to be sacrificed by our ancestors, ethnic minorities, the disabled, the infirm, the weak, the disfigured, and even the elite who have been turned by the crowd against the crowds turned against them. Yet our sacrificial impulse always finds a creative way to attempt its old light and logic of expelling in the form of incarceration or murdering in the form of war, sacrifices for the preservation of collectivism and empire. Every empire of our size got it wrong, but we are the exception. We'll use military only for just victim-supporting causes, not grandeur. We'll only create laws that place nonviolent persons in cages to protect potential future victims, America promises. Yet the sacrificial cat is out of the bag. We cannot go back. The world order of cyclical sacrifice has been forever broken. It consumed the one person whose wrongful collective persecution continues to defang and neuter our most barbaric state cult tendencies, and that was Jesus. And in the wreckage of the world's dying systems of sacrifice and hierarchy, now ever falsely garbed in appeals to social justice, the king billions sing about declares, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives do I give it to you. Do not let your heart be troubled, nor let it be fearful. The end of empires continues under the progress of a new world order, a progressive linear of starts and stumbles path, no longer trapped in an endless cycle of the pagan sacrificial pattern that pulls a future of mercy and nonviolence as the glue that holds communities together into the present. Its vehicle for change is not violence and theft, such as monopoly coinage, taxation, but rather human beings, hearts alight, voluntarily becoming the change they desire in the world. That's the difference between Saturnalia, which is the original winter solstice festival in Western tradition, versus Christianity. That's what we're dealing with. Isn't that more exciting than what you thought it was about? I mean, goodness gracious. It's more exciting than anything. I think if people understood what I'm talking about, and I know that I hate reading old content because you're always like, oh, I would say that differently, and that's clumsy. You critique your work when you read it 4 years later. But generally speaking, I wish people could understand what we're trying to deal with here. We're dealing with something that's hard to communicate in a succinct, quick way, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. And once you see it, you'll realize that even though it seems dark, and even though it seems like politically correct, social justice garbed tyranny that creates so much hurt for people and so much pain, it seems so impossible to defeat. We know, because if you see what I'm showing you, you'll see that Jesus is going to destroy this imperial system. And he won't destroy it the way you want your Hulk Hogan's to come in off the top rope and throw a leg drop at the last minute. He doesn't do it that way. And that's why we're always disappointed, because we completely demand a king in the way kings have always come in history, but the true king of history does not come that way. He will never come that way. You cannot mix our false conception of what a king is with the true king. You can't do 50-50. I've had people tell me, oh, no, we can't imitate Jesus. I'm a Christian, but we got to do Constantine for politics. False. That's wrong. It's totally wrong. You cannot mix 50% Constantine and 50% Jesus and come out with 100% of the solution. You'll get 100% wrong. Jesus does not have a sidekick. He is the king of history. And you cannot build the vision that Jesus put into history through force. Can't do it. Never will work. Doesn't matter how clever you are. Doesn't matter how your budget is. Doesn't matter how many senators and congresspeople and presidents you elect. You can't do it to save your life. You cannot put the kingdom of heaven in through force. It will never happen. And the more we try, which is what you see with globalism and other versions of political power, the more it will backfire and the more it will crumble those empires into dust. That's the way the stumbling block of the message of the gospel works. It will crush to pieces those who stumble over it in their arrogance and pride. So rest assured, the Great Reset will fail utterly and be not remembered as nothing but a joke in history, because the true master of history is fully in charge, but he does not operate the way you and I think he should. And that's why you're always upset when things don't work out exactly as you expected. Back in just a moment.
Ronald Reagan will turn over in his grave if he saw what's going on today.
Crazy things are happening.
You cannot be afraid. You've got to stand up for what you believe is right.
One thing is for sure.
You can't trust anybody.
For talk, news, and information, you can count on us.
Enough is enough. I almost blew a gas hit.
Good for the country.
I know what I'm talking about. A lot of wackos out there.
Your connection to talk about it. The all-new News Talk 1040, WHBO.
Right now, the House is voting on upping federal COVID aid checks sent to needy Americans from $600 in the relief bill just enacted to $2,000. It's what President Trump wants. Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
The President of the United States has put this forth as something that he wants to see in terms of, and part of his signing the legislation yesterday.
Wall Street major indexes closed at record highs on optimism about economic aid. President-elect Biden warning that Trump administration roadblocks in communication to his transition team could put Americans at risk.
We just aren't getting all the information that we need. for the outgoing administration in key national security areas. It's nothing short, in my view, of irresponsibility.
California Governor Gavin Newsom says 96% of Los Angeles County hospitals were so full of coronavirus patients on Saturday, they temporarily turned away ambulances. Chuck Sievertson, ABC News.
Hello, David Gronowski here. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. You can go to our website, aneighborschoice.com, or watch us on video stream or podcasts. Always glad to have you with us as we learn and grow together. Listening to or looking at comments online of our listening audience. This is incredibly helpful. Another says, I taught Sunday school for years and I did not fully comprehend these concepts in the history. It's starting to make sense. Thank you, David. Thank you. I asked so many people as I was growing up, even as an adult. Nobody could explain any of this to me. Yes, it is exciting. Those are just some comments here that we have on YouTube. But what's exciting here is that this is an audience that's growing internationally. That this message is growing internationally. And it doesn't matter. We're not here to get 51% of the community to be in agreement with what Jesus did to deconstruct the community. I mean, think about it. He had 12 disciples with him for 3 years, and none of them knew anything about what he was saying. And they hung out with him for 3 years. What makes you think that we can get 51% of America or something to wake up to this radical, beautiful message of what Jesus was doing in history? So obviously, his success is not contingent upon us intellectually getting this at some kind of majority power or something. It's always perfected in weakness in terms of numbers in a community, in a society, weakness in terms of not grasping for political power. It's so foreign to us that even to suggest this, it's very offensive to even Christians. As I mentioned to, people want Jesus plus. Yeah, I mean, people will literally go to a sermon that says you can't have Jesus plus somebody else to worship, and then they'll go out and say, I need Jesus plus Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, blah, blah, blah. See, they can hear it, but they don't know how to connect it to the state gods around us today. And because we don't want to see what we're doing. When people say, I want free college, they want to believe in the fantasy. They want to believe that somehow you can have something for nothing. And they don't care if it sacrifices their neighbor's wealth by crippling the economy with a burden of debt that will be disastrous for anybody trying to have a free and prosperous life. They don't care because they think if enough people in a crowd demand something, that the sacrifice and violence done to them, they think if enough people are okay with locking people up for nonviolent drug offenses, it's okay. They believe in the lie of preemptive violence. Remember, you heard the concept of preemptive war, the Bush doctrine for the Iraq war, that we have the right to preemptively start war with countries that we perceive to be a future threat. That's the concept that is at the heart of the worship of the state that we have in America today. It is preemptive violence for every kind of thing. Well, we have to preemptively use violence to force or fine or fee or take or threaten with arrest, all kinds of nonviolent choices, because if we allow them to have their freedom, our neighbors, they might abuse their freedom and become greedy or rich or decadent or privileged or anything terrible that we're told to hate. So we say we have to have a minimum wage law because we have to be able to threaten people with violence to pay a certain wage, because if we allow them to have freedom, my goodness, they'll just be rich, greedy capitalists. Says people who got those ideas from rich, greedy corporatists and billionaires like Jeff Bezos, who have no problem with taxation being higher for the so-called rich, or minimum wages being, decreed higher. They don't care. They're happy with these little stupid policies that politicians throw out to the crowd to get them to sacrifice their neighbor and be busy hating each other and fighting over who's the most victim of the system. It's because of Christianity that being a victim is even an identity that people covet. In the ancient world, do you think for one moment that people coveted the identity of a victim? It is because of Christianity that being a victim is perceived to be sacred in some sense. That's why the New York Times was lauding a story today about some college kid who exposed some other young college girl, or they were going into college, exposed her saying a horrible word. And it ruined her entire attempt to get into the college she wanted to get into. And he was holding on to this for years, waiting to release it to destroy her career in college. And the New York Times lauds this kind of behavior as good. It's because they have the Christian sensibility of concern for victims. You shouldn't marginalize people, shouldn't use words to hurt people, marginalize people's identity. But they don't have the fullness of Christ. They don't have the forgiveness. They don't have the mercy. They don't have the grace. All they have is chop down, tear down, hurt, cut, stab, divide. That's all they offer, because that's the way the world makes peace. They make peace through sacrifice. And so they're trying to create holiness codes and speech codes and rhetoric codes, and it's all about being cool, and it's all about sacrificing those who don't keep up with the cool crowd. And what's cool is to be considered a victim. And it's only considered to be cool because Jesus is conquering history. And so this is a stage in that. You're watching a stage in history in real time of Jesus conquer history. And in the moment that you're in, it looks dire. It looks weak, but you can only see a small, tiny little perspective of history. You can't see the bigger picture. You can't fully grasp the full significance of what's unfolding. Jesus does not do things the way you expect. He doesn't force his way onto people. That's the kind of people that you elect. You elect people that force their way onto people. And that's why you're always disappointed, because Jesus said you can't force your way onto people, and we're still doing it day in and day out. Every single time you go to the election ballot box and you say, I'm going to force this way, I'm going to force this, I'm going to force this, you're not professing the love of Christ. I don't care what people say. I don't care what their excuse is. You cannot serve two masters. And the way of force is the way that is the opposite of the kingdom of heaven. It's the way that's the opposite of the kingdom of Christ. And you can't have a little bit of both. I'm sorry. I want that too, because it seems a little safer. But apparently, the way Jesus has set up world history, when you try to go a little bit of force and a little bit of Jesus, it backfires, okay? Because they don't mix. Because when you have the Good Samaritan saving the person in need, it's not a political prescription. If it was, it wouldn't have been the beautiful act that it was. The Birth of Mercy, a story by Surat Dasgupta, published on December 29th, 2018 on libertarianchristians.com. Recently, a psychology professor by the name of Eric Sprinkle stated that the Virgin Mary may not have given consent when the angel Gabriel told her that she would give birth to Jesus. Besides showing the utter ignorance that is overwhelming in academia, the professor proved how much contemporary thought is possessed by ideological and identitarian groupthink. In reality, it is hard for ideologues to shape the crucifixion-haunted world into their own image, for Christ had already shattered the very foundation of ideology, violent force. The virgin birth story speaks of something remarkable and unprecedented in human history. It gives us a completely new perspective on the role of human beings, voluntarily creating an underground society that would ultimately reshape the world in the image of Jesus. In the times before Christ and outside the Hebrew people, the world had been largely dominated by grand narratives that empowered lynch mobs and thus gave rise to the notion of might is right. We know these narratives today as the classical myths of the ancient world. These myths, such as the birth of Dionysus, contain evidence that reveals the empowering of the accusing mob in ancient pagan societies. In his book, Things Hidden Since the Foundation of the World, René Girard explains the violent origins of the pagan birth myths. Stories of this kind always involve more than a hint of violence, Girard says. Zeus bears down on Semele, the mother of Dionysus, like a beast of prey upon its victim, and in effect strikes her with lightning. The birth of the gods is always a kind of rape. These monstrous couplings between men, gods, and beasts are in close correspondence with the phenomenon of reciprocal violence and its method of working itself out. The orgasm that appeases the god is a metaphor for collective violence. Now, you might listen to that and say, that's a little heavy for talk radio. But is it? Because what he is describing is exactly parallel to what we see today in collective violence. But I'll continue with this story. It is almost as if the virgin birth account of the New Testament were written as a response to the birth myths of the Greek gods. In the Gospels, Mary's status, unlike that of Semele's, is elevated by God to that of nobility. And I don't know if that's how you pronounce her name, but I'm not a big fan of the story. I don't, the Semele or whatever her name is, don't really hang out with Zeus much. Is elevated by God to that of nobility. In the Gospel of Luke, the angel Gabriel meets Mary by saying, "Hail, O favored one, the Lord is with you." God makes known to Mary that she will bring forth his son, to which Mary replies, "Behold, I am the handmaid of the Lord, let it be to me according to your word." There is a complete absence of violence and coercion in the virgin birth story. There is no element of force whatsoever. For centuries, humanity has operated under a principle of ritual sacrifice, where the sacrifice of one may bring the temporal unity of many. Our modern-day society, despite the lack of extravagant mythologies, still operates under this same principle. We divide ourselves into factions and are forever in search for that one sacrifice, that one execution, which will bring us nearer to utopia. Mass incarceration of innocents to rid ourselves of crime, abortion to bring family stability, and war to bring peace. This is the story of the rape of Semele, of achieving good through coercion. The mortal and vulnerable becomes nothing more than a means to an end. It is not so with the God of the Bible. When Christ was born, singing could be heard coming down from heaven. Glory to God in the highest, the angels sang, and on earth, peace, goodwill towards men. The image of a lowly teenage girl giving birth to the Son of God among animals and poor shepherds in a manger turns the powers and principalities of the world on their heads. This was God and the human race working together to create a kingdom of peace on earth, one that prophet Daniel predicted will outlast the empires of men. The God of the Bible brings order and peace through mercy and self-sacrifice. The mortal and the vulnerable is proclaimed to be the image bearer of God, and Mary is given the honor to become the mother of divinity. The young Mary accepts this honor, and in doing so, she becomes a precursor to her own son dying on the cross. This divine dance of self-sacrifice would come full circle when Mary, an old woman by now, would stand at the feet of the cross upon which her son would die for the sins of the world. With Christ's birth, Mary is bestowed with the privilege of becoming the mother of the divine emperor Jesus. She represents mankind voluntarily partaking with God and bringing the kingdom of God to a world riddled with violence and degeneracy. The birth of a child signifies how Jesus' kingdom would undermine the mob rule and totalitarian nature of power in our age. The way of God is of self-sacrifice, the willingness to be expelled from the confines of worldly power in such a way as to deconstruct and lay bare the evil of worldly power to all of humanity, thus enabling us to forsake violence and embrace mercy. Mercy can only come about when we see others as children of God. And when we think of children, we see the infant Jesus, innocence and vulnerability personified, lying at the bosom of a human mother. Nothing is as dangerous to a sacrificial machinery as a small child and his mother carrying within them an overwhelming value, the spark of divinity. The birth of Christ, like the crucifixion, calls on us to treat our neighbor as we would the child Christ and his mother Mary. It calls us to imitate these two brilliant self-sacrificing personalities, and through imitation, it calls us to compassion. The way of Zeus raping Semele is dead. And nothing, not even our ideological saber-toothed concern for victims, can ever replace it, except for self-sacrifice, voluntary negotiation, and mercy. This is good news, folks. This is what Christmas is all about. This is what the whole point of having a holy day in which you reflect on the birth of a child born in a manger is all about. This is what's more important and more powerful than any kind of cheap, pathetic great reset. These people have no power. They are gnats, and there is a bigger project going on in humanity, and it's time for us to understand it. It's time for us to get on board. It's time for us to imitate the personhood revolution of Jesus. We'll be back in just a moment. Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality, grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals, join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER.
Not ready to go to your favorite seafood restaurant? Get the highest quality fish for less delivered straight to your door by Fast Fresh Seafood. Order our fresh hot snapper, grouper, mahi, and more. They're boneless, skinless, flash frozen the same day, and individually vacuum wrapped. Pick the size filet you want, the amount you want, and checkout's easy at fastfreshseafood.com. The best thing, every fish is on sale. Fastfreshseafood.com. Caught fresh for you, delivered straight to you. Stay home and stay safe.
Do you despise lawyers? That may be the case until you need one. If you've been in an auto accident and need legal advice, go to the local attorneys that have served Tampa Bay families for over 28 years. Catania and Catania. They are family owned. They understand your needs with legal advice. When you need legal representation, Catania will care for your case from the beginning to final settlement. You won't need to worry. Catania will represent you throughout the entire process. Auto and motorcycle accidents are too frequent in Florida. If you've been a victim, contact Catania. They don't get paid if you don't get paid. Referrals on request. Contact Catania. Putting families first.
Offices Tampa, non-attorney spokesperson.
Speaking of failing empires, let's turn to New York City. New York Daily News has a story. Last man to share jail cell with Jeffrey Epstein died last month of COVID. The last man to share a cell with Jeffrey Epstein died last month in a Bronx apartment after catching coronavirus at a jail for cooperating witnesses. Efrain Stone Reyes, 51, was found dead on November 27th at his mother's apartment, the NYPD confirmed. In August 2019, he shared a cell with Epstein only to be transferred to the privately run Queens detention facility the day before the accused sex trafficker hanged himself, according to his family and Bureau of Prison Records. That's what happens in New York City. It's stunning, isn't it? When we look at the news-making business, they are in the game of trying to be the myth makers of our time. And they're trying to do their best to get us to agree to not see the victims that the neoliberal globalist system is creating. They don't want us to see the victims. When I tell people don't eat vegetable oils are correlated with people having comorbidities, which can be lethal in a situation with this virus. That doesn't pick up any currency in the corporate press because they are gatekeepers and media myth makers for a lying establishment that doesn't want to take responsibility and do what's necessary to encourage people to take responsibility for their own life. They want to tell you that everything is all about politics. It's all about what the state and its corporation allies can do for you. And they don't want to tell you to take care of your body by eating ancestrally. They want to distract you by saying, hey, go and protest syrup. Go and protest syrup. Don't dismantle the mass incarceration system. Don't come together and encourage Donald Trump to do more than the First Step Act and to do more clemencies. Just divide people, tear people apart by race, gender, and religion and things like that. That's what media sacrifice of one for the greater good. The gods demand sacrifice. And who are you to tell us that you have an alternative to help the rain come on the crops by telling us that you have what is this thing that you're offering? You're offering us science? You're offering us better agricultural practices? No. We preserve order, we preserve and prevent famine and plague by sacrificing some for the gods. That's what the priestly caste of the ancient world would do. And if you spoke out of turn, it was off with your head. And so the inheritors of that tradition and corporate media continue to do whatever they can to hide the victims of the violence of our nanny state. They don't want you to see. And they don't want you to take responsibility for yourself because free agency is not part of their equation. They want to be God. And in their world, their kind of view of a God does not allow for free will. Their kind of God gets you obsessed with chasing the illusions and the desires of your heart, only to become enslaved to them. Their view of divinity is to force their way onto your life and onto your family. They want to subsidize what's considered science so that they have political control over what's considered to be truth. They have politicized the process of science, when in reality it is Christianity itself which gave us the scientific method. They have tried to turn science into a religion, saying, I believe in science. That is the antithesis of what the science is about. You don't believe in science. It is a process. It's not an outcome that is decided by consensus and monopoly funding. But that's what they want. They want to push might makes right and sacrifice, but do it now in the name of victims. Do it now in the name of protecting the elderly. And maybe the people who are going along with this really believe in it. In fact, that's the only way they do go along with it, is because it has enough of the feeling of Christianity that it seems to kind of superficially scratch the itch for a transcendent meaning. Everybody's desperate for meaning. Everybody's desperate to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And this great reset globalism that doesn't tell you to do anything to take care of your health by rejecting the government's subsidies of vegetable oils and processed flour, processed sugar. They don't tell you to do any of that. They just tell you to sit, be a good little child, be a good little slave, be a good little peasant, little serf, and you wait for your two corporations to provide you services and goods, and you eat your plant goop that's made to taste like beef, and you get taxed if you try to buy beef. That's the kind of sick, sad, nanny state scam that they're trying to push on people. And the media does their best to denigrate free agency and free will, and to hide the victims of the consequences of the policies of the type of corporations and governments that they prefer. That's what they're there for. But what we do in response to that is to become the media that we should always be, to tell the truth, to hold a mirror up to society and tell them this is not right. These lockdowns are sacrificing innocent lives. Forcing people to take medicine is a denial of their free agency. It's a denial of the image of God itself. It's an assault on the idea that there is a creative force that respects agency behind the universe. These are things that we have to talk about. We have to be the media that we're hungry for. We have to be the media that tells the truth and represents the story of the victims of all of these different grand reset projects that want to ram down their global utopian ideas, even if it means sacrificing some for some failed greater good. We have to repent. Did you listen to a program today that told you repentance is the outcome of what we should think about? It's not something to talk about at church. It's something to practice and talk about in the public square. And that's why I'm talking about it on airwaves right now, all over this country, all over this world. Repentance, turning away, changing our mind, renewing our mind by imitating the one who split time, the one who gives us the inspiration to go for the big dreams, to conquer the big challenges like disease and poverty, scarcity. Jesus. I'm David Gornosky. Email me hello@aneighborschoice.com. Godspeed.